Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to both you, Chair Blumenthal and Senator Hawley, for holding this hearing, Senator Blackburn for her good work in this area. So I was thinking Section 230 was enacted back in 1996. Probably there's just one or two remaining members that were involved in leading that bill. When we had dial-up modems accessing CompuServe, that's what we're dealing with here. To say that the internet of 2023 is different from what legislators contemplated in 1996 is a drastic understatement. And yet, as I said at our antitrust subcommittee hearing yesterday, the largest dominant digital platforms have stopped everything that we have tried to do to update our laws to respond to the issues we are seeing, from privacy to competition. And like Senator Blumenthal, with the exception of the human trafficking that I'd been involved in early on, I was not crying for major changes to Section 230 either at the beginning. And part of what's brought me to this moment is the sheer opposition to every single thing we try to do. Even when we tried, Lindsey Graham and I, before that Senator McCain did the Honest Ads Act to put disclaimers and disclosures, we got initial objection and then eventually some support, but it still hasn't passed. The competition bills, the work on even on algorithms. The simple idea is that we should do some reforms to the app stores. This idea that we shouldn't be self-preferencing their own products when they have a 90% or a 40% market share, depending on which platform it is. The hypocrisy of things that we were told would break the internet that we now see them agreeing to do in Europe. That is the final dagger as far as I'm concerned, and why you see shifting positions on Section 230. Obviously, this is also a cry for some ability of the companies to come forward and actually propose some real reforms we can put into law, because so far it's just buy it all off with money, commercials, ads attacking those of us who have been trying to make a difference. So my question, I guess to you, Professor Fareed, first is, they've said, trust us, we've got this for so long, and the way the internet companies amplify content profit, as Senator Hawley was explaining, off of it, allowing criminal activity to persist on their platforms, we clearly need reforms. And I always think of it like, if you yell fire in a crowded theater, you know, the theater multiplex, as long as they have nice exits there, aren't going to be liable. But if they broadcasted it in all their theaters, that would be called algorithms, that would be a different story. You noted in your testimony that some legal arguments have conflated search algorithms with recommendation algorithms. Can you explain how these algorithms differ and their role in amplifying content on platforms?
Good. Thank you, Senator. So if you go to Google or Bing and you search for whatever topic you want, your interests and the company's interests are very well aligned. The company wants to deliver to you relevant content for your search, and you want relevant content, and we are aligned. And they do a fairly good job of that. That is a search algorithm. It is trying to find information when you proactively go and search for something. When you go to YouTube, however, to watch a video of a link that I sent you, you didn't ask for them to queue up another video. You didn't ask for the thumbnails down the right-hand side. You didn't ask for any of that. And in fact, you can't really turn any of that off. That's a recommendation algorithm. And the difference between the search algorithm, where the company's interests and your interests are aligned, that is not true of recommendation algorithms. Recommendation algorithms are designed for one thing: to make the platform sticky, to make you coming back for more, because the more time you spend on the platform, the more ads are delivered, the more money we make. And if we're talking about harms, we've talked about terrorism, we've talked about child sexual abuse, we've talked about illegal drugs and illegal weapons, we should also talk about things like body image issues. We should talk about suicidal ideation. Go to TikTok, go to Instagram, start watching a few videos on one topic, and you get inundated with those. Why? That's because the recommendation is vacuuming up all your personal data and trying to figure out what is it that is going to bring you here over and over again. Last thing on this issue, because it goes to knowledge, is that the Facebooks of the world, the YouTubes of the world know that the most conspiratorial, the most salacious, the most outrageous, the most hateful content drives user engagement. Their own internal studies have shown that as you drive content from cats to lawful, to awful but lawful, and then across the violative line to awful, to illegal, engagement goes up. And so the algorithms have learned to recommend exactly the problematic content because that is what it drives user engagement. We should have a conversation about what is wrong with us. Why do we keep clicking on this stuff? But the company know that they are driving the most harmful content because it maximizes profit.
Thank you. Professor Franks, kind of along those lines, circuit courts have interpreted Section 230 differently, with some saying that social media and internet companies are not liable for content that could only have been created with the tools they designed. However, unlike most other companies that make dangerous or defective products, internet and social media companies are often shielded by Section 230 from cases that involve design defects. Should Congress consider reforming Section 230 to allow for design defect cases to move forward when a site is designed in a way that causes harm?
Thank you. I think it would be, as I said with the other suggestion about revisions to Section 230, the concern I would have is about how exactly to codify that sort of standard. And I think that the impulse there is a good one. I think that the distinction between faulty design as opposed to simply recommendations or making access to other content, I think that is a solid distinction to make. My concern efficient way to reform Section 230 is to try not to think about discrete categories of harmful content or conduct, but rather to talk about the underlying fundamental problem with Section 230, which is this idea that you should provide immunity in exchange for basically doing nothing or for even for accelerating or promoting harmful content.
Yeah, I agree. I was just trying to, throw it out there. Last thing, how would reforms to Section 230, Professor Franks, create a safer internet for kids and where Congress should focus its efforts? We have a lot of things, and talk a little bit about why that could be a priority.
Well, one of the reasons it's a high priority is exactly for the reasons that Professor Farid has been speaking to, that those types of behavioral changes that we see that are essentially an intended consequence or an intended strategy on the part of companies to keep people on their platforms longer, to keep them engaging with those platforms. These are dangerous for adults, but they're particularly pernicious for children. This is a kind of approach that is essentially trying to encourage a form of addiction to these services. And it is part, I think, of what explains some of the very heightened rhetoric on the site on the part of the tech industry and those who are convinced that the status quo is the best way forward. People identify so closely with their social media platforms at this point that any changes that are suggested to Section 230 feel like personal attacks. And I think that that is a testament to how much Google and Facebook and TikTok and every other company we can think of is really striving and succeeding to make us feel that we cannot live without these products, that they're not products that we are using, but they are using us. And so I think it is of particular importance and concern when this kind of effect is having on younger and younger children who have had really no time to develop their own personalities and their own principles.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's very clear that we want